All right, well, we are live and welcome to the MMA Group Chat. This is our inaugural episode, and this is the place where we're going to be breaking down all of the biggest events in the world of mixed martial arts and all of the fights happening every single weekend. I'm one of your co-hosts. My name is Jeremiah. This is my brother Tobey, and this is one of my best friends, Noah, and we're going to be here discussing everything we think is interesting, all of the big things happening, and all of the fights that you care about the most every Saturday night. So as we go ahead and get started today, as I was thinking about this fight card, it kind of brought to remembrance a recent trend that I've seen in recent years of, there used to be a big focus on the larger weight classes having to headline a card, and it somewhat, limited what we considered big cards, what we considered big pay-per-views, because we thought, or the prevailing thought was that it wasn't really a huge card unless a big weight class like a heavyweight or a light heavyweight was headlining the card. And over the past few years, we've seen the tide turning, and the lower weight classes are getting more shine now than I think ever. And it's really interesting to me, especially over these past 2 weeks. Last week we had women's flyweight Rose Namajunas and Amanda Ribas. This week we've got another women's flyweight main event at a venue, not even at the Apex. And so that's kind of how I wanted to open our discussion. Have you guys noticed this? Have you guys considered it to be as impactful as maybe I have, or am I going crazy here?
Yeah, it's definitely been pretty impactful, and you're exactly right. I think the biggest thing to look at is now we have a card in Atlantic City. It's not even in the Apex, and we have like a lower weight class, a female weight class, headlining this card. We had, as you said, we had the Rose fight last week. The Ribas, thank you. And so we've got a lot of these lower weight classes now headlining cards. We see Pantoja headlining a pay-per-view now, and I think it's kind of dependent on the fighters, I think, more than the division, because when you do have big names like Rose Namajunas and Amanda Ribas, these sorts of fighters have a big enough name to them where I think they can really headline. Kind of going back to what I said about Pantoja. Pantoja's a big enough name, and he's got enough skill to where I think that he can headline these sorts of pay-per-views. I'm not sure about Urseg. Yeah, I guess we're going to see here in a couple months, but I definitely can see a trend going that way. And I think people are genuinely enjoying these fights too. It's not just like, oh, we want to see these big guys knock each other out. Like, they're enjoying seeing these lower weight classes kind of have the unlimited stamina going at each other. So
No, I agree, and I think like one big thing, at least like when I was watching pay-per-views this last year, I think like how much like longer a high pace can go, and people like watching that, especially Moreno versus Figueroa last year on International Fight Week, and I just think it's gonna be interesting because I think like out of all the lighter weight class divisions, men's flyweight is like the less top heavy with like star power, so it's gonna be interesting to see how like 301 goes, but I think a big reason that like so many lighter weight classes are headlining fight nights and like pay-per-views is just like there's just so much like star power at the top. You look at Taporia, you look at like O'Malley. I just think there's a lot more star power. So
I think it could also, another thing too, is it really does depend on who they're fighting as well. Because again, I'm not sure Urseg is going to have the name value to headline a pay-per-view. I think Pantoja definitely could. He's got the skill, and people love Pantoja, especially the Brazil card. It's perfect. But I'm not sure about Urseg yet. I think O'Malley, is a big enough name. It doesn't matter who he fights. He's going to sell pay-per-views. I think it just depends, because you can't tell me if Merab beats Sean O'Malley, who I'm assuming gets the next title fight, and he gets some, I don't know, Nurmagomedov maybe. You can't tell me that fight might not sell as many pay-per-views as this past bantamweight fight. So I think it also kind of depends on where or who the challengers are and who the champions are as well. So, but right now we've got some good champions that do have a lot of name value.
Yeah, and I think the time that I remember it kind of starting is during COVID. I think COVID kind of forced this phenomenon on us. The first real card I remember this happening was June of 2020 when Amanda Nunes and Felicia Spencer headlined a pay-per-view. And I think at the time, all of us were just so thankful to have fights that it was like, okay, well, it's a title fight. This is no other sport is going on. And I don't think we quite realized the shift that was happening as they were slowly bringing up people like Sean O'Malley. I mean, in even later that year in 2020, when the first Davis and Figueiredo and Brandon Moreno fight happened, I think everybody realized that night when the first fight happened, oh, like this is something people would pay to see. You wouldn't used to think of that, and it makes me sad that this didn't happen in Demetrius Johnson's heyday. That's the one thing that makes me sad. Kobe Bryant used to say, y'all should be happy that Allen Iverson is not a foot taller. And I think that's kind of how we feel in MMA too. If Demetrius Johnson was a middleweight, I mean, he'd be considered the best fighter ever in a lot of circles. And it's a shame. He could have made a bag if he was fighting in this era of the UFC. And unfortunately, that doesn't happen. But yeah, I do appreciate this era a lot because I think we're finally giving shine to people who are top of the line in their skill, but who weren't recognized because, maybe they weren't considered as being seen as the top guy just because of the weight class. And I think it's nice to see that we're finally getting shine on people who are top notch and top level.
Yeah, I think that's well said, and you're exactly right. I mean, guys like Demetrius Johnson, it stinks we've missed out on guys like that getting these huge pay-per-views because that guy would have been so marketable if Dana tried to market him better. But I do agree. I like where we're at, where it's talent can headline a pay-per-view, not your weight, because at the end of the day, if you're talented, people are going to want to watch you. But unless y'all have anything else to add, I mean, we can move on with this topic, talking about another lower weight class. How about the women's flyweight weight class? Right now, we've got a big fight coming up to headline this current pay-per-view in Atlantic City, and then we've also got news of the recent Ultimate Fighter with Grasso versus Shevchenko. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
So I love the pick for the Ultimate Fighter. I think it's like good feud, a lot of fights, really close, but like I feel like it's like really gonna hold the division up because obviously Blanchfield versus Fiorot, #1 contender, right? But you've got like someone in Macy Barber, who what do you do with her after this? Like you could give her the loser of this, but if Blanchfield's getting the next shot, and that fight between Shevchenko and Grasso isn't gonna fight for so long, it's just I just feel like it's gonna hold the division up because again, if that fight, I mean, I'm assuming they're probably gonna have. I don't know if y'all disagree. They're probably gonna have that Grasso Shevchenko at the Sphere in September. That's what I would assume. So you're kind of pushing that Blanchfield fight till next year. So then you have Barber weight too. So I don't know what y'all think. I just think it just kind of holds up the division with that.
I think it really depends on what we see happen tomorrow night. And I say that for a couple reasons because I think Rose and Barber is there for the taking. That's a fight I think no one would mind seeing. And I don't think Barber's at a place where she deserves a title shot yet. I think she's one win away. No doubt her run's been impressive, but her versus Rose, I think Barber and Rose would be inclined to take that fight. And it also depends on what we see in the main event tomorrow night. Because Blanchfield, I will say this, as much as I've loved watching the run of Blanchfield, her last fight did not convince me she's ready to be a world title holder. That was a scary fight to watch. As being a fan of Blanchfield, you felt during the whole fight that she was an inch away from losing it if one shot clipped her correctly. If tomorrow goes out and, it's a split decision, if the scorecards could go either way, I personally don't have a problem seeing Grasso and Shevchenko again. I mean, everybody who I watched that fight with thinks Shevchenko won. I think we need the rubber match. I think they're two of the biggest stars if you consider the impact the UFC's been making in Mexico, and then Shevchenko being a staple. That's an important fight to have. Now, I will say if either Manon or Erin goes out and just absolutely starches one of the others, that's a statement. And if for some, and I do think if that happens, the winner merits being the backup fighter at the Sphere. And if for some reason one of them falls out, you slide them right in. But I don't have a problem with the fight. I think that's the fight I want to see. It's kind of like Moreno and Figueiredo in a sense, as you could run those guys back 5, 6, 7 times. I'm watching every time Shevchenko and Grasso. I mean, the scrambles that happen in those fights when they're on the ground. I will not get tired of watching those two go at it.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think it's inevitable that the two of them fight again, whether it is for this next title, which it probably will be at the Sphere, as you said. But they definitely need another fight. And the two of them are big enough big enough names where I even think they could even headline like a pay-per-view and nobody would even be mad about it. Like, you're exactly right. Every fight that we've had between the two of them has been absolute fireworks. And of course, again, the controversial decision between Shevchenko and Grasso in the last fight, I think really kind of left people wanting more, but it makes this division so much harder because you have Blanchfield and Fiorot. The winner of this fight absolutely deserves a title shot. No debate about it. Absolutely deserves it. Whether it's a split decision, knockout, whatever, that winner deserves a title shot at some point. So it does really hold up the division because I don't see how you can make Shevchenko wait any longer, especially with the hype around the Ultimate Fighter now. And for selfish reasons, I wish they would have not fumbled at UFC 300 and did Wiley versus Grasso. I know that's kind of selfish because it wouldn't have made any sense in the division, to be honest, but it would have just been a heck of a fight. But either way, you're right, Tobey. It's going to take forever before we even see Grasso versus Shevchenko. And it's like, do we have to wait until 2025 before the winner of tonight actually gets their title shot? And then that leaves me with another question. What does the loser do at this point? I know you mentioned, Tobey, possibly the loser taking who did you say with the loser taking? Was it Rose that you said? Rose, so you think the loser should take Rose, but I'm not completely sold on Rose getting the loser. I think Rose and Barber maybe should fight. And if the two of them fight, do y'all have any ideas what the loser does?
Well, I think, again, most of these questions will be answered tomorrow night because if Fiorot loses, you have no reason to do Fiorot versus Rose again because, again, it was a great fight, but you just did that. But, yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. Like, one thing I was thinking about, though, not to disregard the question, but, like, you look at, like, the run that Shevchenko had in this division, and I will say that, like, I think it's a lot more talent stacked now. Blanchfield's only 24. Like, I know she's had some questionable wins. If she can win tomorrow dominantly, get that title shot, I mean, it would be really hard to stay champion long in this division. But, like, here's the thing. You look at Barber, too. Barber looked great in her last fight, but there were still some moments, like, a lot of these, like, contenders in this division look like almost like they're there, but they still have some questionable moments. So, I don't know. But, again, it's just, I think because I think if Blanchfield loses, you could do Blanchfield versus Rose, but I just think Rose versus Barber makes so much sense right now. But, again, a little higher in the rankings, I'm kind of interested to see, like, what do you do with Taylor Santos? Like, do you give her, if Andrade wins a close one?
I'm going to mute you, and I'm going to cut in because Taylor Santos is not in the UFC anymore. So, she's not going to fight anybody, whether they win or lose this fight.
I'm cutting Jeremiah for a second. I didn't know that either, so I'm gonna stand with Tobey on this one. I had no idea that happened. So
yeah, she was removed from the rankings a couple of weeks after her last fight, and she's now signed with the PFL and scheduled to fight this upcoming Thursday on the first PFL event of the season. So Taylor Santos is not an option. But I will say you're right. It is difficult to think about where we go next. I mean, if Manon loses, I don't think you can give her to Rose a few months after her beating her. There's a few names from up in the rankings, though, that pique my interest. Blanchfield has one loss, and that loss happens to be off of a hot up-and-comer named Tracy Cortez. Her boxing, Mexican Independence Day last year, looked top-notch. If Blanchfield loses, there's a real scenario where she doesn't really have someone to fight next. Because if you do, I think Barber and Rose makes perfect sense. If Manon wins, she's the backup for the title fight, and then Blanchfield is the odd man out. So you could make a fight night where Blanchfield has a chance to get her loss back, or Tracy Cortez can pop into the top 5. But let's not forget Natalia Silva. Natalia Silva just absolutely destroyed Viviane Araújo. And, I mean, her karate in the division, the striking is potentially, she might have the best striking in the division. Lipski's looking good off of a couple recent victories. So there's a lot of options what you do, but I do think, so if we're guaranteeing basically that Shevchenko and Grasso are going to rematch. We're guaranteeing that the winner of tomorrow night's fight is fighting for a title. So that leaves 3 people left. That leaves the loser of tomorrow night, Rose and Barber. Someone's going to be left out. Someone's going to have to take on a contender. And I feel like Rose's name is too big. Barber's on a 5-fight win streak. So I think the loser of tomorrow night's fight gets stuck with a contender to get back on track. And you have to do that to keep the division moving. That's been the problem with some of the divisions that we have that are stagnated right now, is that it gets top heavy, and then the top heavy guys don't want to have to fight lower. And then you end up getting stuck and rotating the same 3 guys. To me, if this fight tomorrow night has huge stakes as far as how far it'll set you back for a potential big fight or for a title shot, in my opinion.
One more person I wanted to say, okay? She's fought so many people in the division, and like it would just be, it wouldn't be weird seeing her make like a title run, but she's just like, she's fought so many like high fights, just like versus these prospects it would be weird. But like, what if Andrade has a great performance at 300 and like Blanchfield or Fiorot has a horrible one? Because again, you don't want to do Fiorot versus Rose. If Fiorot has a bad performance, again, it obviously depends on tomorrow, but like, it's just, it would be such weird. It'd be weird to give those matchups to a Barber or a Rose. If Andrade has a good performance, do y'all think Andrade has a chance at fighting the loser of this? Because like, I just feel like, I mean, it's just interesting with where she is in the rankings. Like, what would happen?
I don't see Andrade getting the loser of this fight personally. I think in terms of title contention, I don't know if Andrade's name is really even in like the serious conversation. Of course, I think she's number 5 in the division right now, so of course her name is in the conversation, but it's so far down compared to these. There's so many fighters that deserve it. I was gonna say, Jeremiah, before you started kind of going about who the loser would get. I would like to see Cortez fight, but I think she's already got a fight booked. I can't remember who it's against, but I think she might have a fight booked as of right now. But I would love to see Natalia Silva get the loser of this fight, whether it's Fiorot or Blanchfield. I would love to see Natalia Silva get this fight personally. So,
I also, just to clarify regarding Andrade, her fight at 300 is not at flyweight. She is going back down to strawweight to fight Marina Rodriguez. So that we might see her drop in the flyweight rankings once after 300 and they update things. She seems to be caught in this stage in her career where she's constantly fluctuating, and I mean, I think she somewhat gave up on the flyweight run after Blanchfield got her out in a round last February. So yeah, the weird thing is Andrade is such a big name that if she does win or lose at 300, you could just throw her in as like a co-main event of a fight night against one of these flyweights that just doesn't have a fight that's clear next. And so you're right, she's kind of the name that always keeps popping up. She's top 5 in probably both divisions at this point. It's tough, and I mean, even it's tough too because, you know, at this point I had thought Tatiana Suarez might be in this conversation as well when we want to talk about people who are at strawweight who I thought would be coming up for a title shot soon. So there's a lot of things at play. But yeah, that's going to be interesting what they do next. I agree with the Silva. I want to see how far Silva can go. She's very limited in the fact that she really doesn't have much of a ground game. She's much like Wonderboy and Paige. She's very dependent on keeping space and getting big into those karate style striking matchups. So it'll be interesting to see how far she can go in the division, but she's definitely done enough to get a chance at a loser of one of these big fights coming up. But, you know, I guess we're just going to have to see what happens next. Yeah, tomorrow night, man, it's got some big stakes. This is one of the biggest women's fights in a long time. It feels like non-title fights. This one has me buzzed.
Yeah, I think tomorrow night does have a lot of stakes. And if we have nothing, do y'all have anything else to add to the women's flyweight? So, do y'all want to talk about how about some other stakes? Not bigger stakes, probably not anywhere close to as big, but other stakes for tomorrow night. And that's Buckley versus Luque. A huge fight in my opinion. You know, Luque's moved down to welterweight. I think he's really found his home kind of in welterweight. Spent the first large portion of his career in middleweight, and I think his last 3 fights maybe have been in welter. I think he's undefeated in welterweight currently. Is that right?
I think you may be talking about Buckley.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
You said Luque. I was like, I don't remember Luque ever fighting yet.
No, I meant Buckley.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, yeah.
Yeah, so sorry. Yeah, I meant Buckley if I said Luque. And so, I think he's really found his place in this division. The biggest thing is I don't know where these fighters go next after this fight, no matter who wins or loses. I drew up a couple of scenarios. Well, actually, not to backtrack, but I just realized we forgot to give our prediction on tomorrow night's fight. As much as we talked about it, do we want to talk about that right now, or
we can do that or give predictions when we kind of walk through the main card. Up to y'all.
Yeah, we don't need to do the predictions right now. We can do that afterwards. So, kind of what I've drawn up right now is I think it's really complicated if Luque wins because he lost to Neil, and Neil just lost to Ian Machado. So it's kind of weird. That's like, what do you do with Luque now if he wins this fight? So the situation that I planned or that I drew up in my head would be Sean Brady potentially, which was his initial opponent for this fight before Sean Brady had to back out and then they gave him Buckley. But the initial thing that I kind of thought of was Sean Brady. He's just in such a weird place in this division because he lost to Neil. Maybe he could get a rematch with Neil, but I don't know. Y'all have any thoughts on what maybe Luque would do if he wins this fight?
So I actually thought this might be a little bit of a reach, but like if Luque goes out there and dominates tomorrow, I thought Gilbert Burns was a name that would be interesting because like, I mean, I thought he was actually doing good in that JDM fight. I personally thought he was up 2-0 in that third round. But you just look at kind of where he's at in career, a couple of losses, and you look at a guy like Luque. They're both on like, again, I think this is like Luque's like last big run towards the title. I think that would be a matchup. But this division is just so like it's so weird because like I feel like Wonder Boy and Page is gonna happen, so that's out, right? He's not, neither person's getting Gary. He's only fighting up in the top 10, right? Brady could be a name, but besides Brady. I mean, I don't want to see either of them fight Neil Magny. I'm not a Neil Magny fan. I can't lie. So I think Burns is a name, but then with Buckley was a guy I think if he wins and it's a closer fight, I think you could do a Jeff Neal for that. But again, why would you fight 11 then 10? It's the division's in a weird spot.
I actually, when I was looking over this, the next name I was going to throw out was Gilbert Burns. I actually think that fight would make a lot of sense. Gilbert Burns, I think, is sitting at number 6 in the division right now. So it would be a little bit of a reach for Luque to maybe make that jump, but it would make sense in my opinion. I think Luque has the talent, and even though he's lost some big fights in his career, he's won some big fights in his career in my opinion. So I think a Gilbert Burns versus Luque fight would be really interesting. And then if he loses, I think that's even harder of a call. I was thinking maybe Kevin Holland after his last loss to Michael Venom Page. So I think Luque's in a very interesting situation when it comes to this fight. I think Buckley's got a lot more wiggle room than Luque does. Luque, not to give anything away, Luque is my favorite in this fight, but I just think Buckley has so much more to gain than Luque, in my opinion. But I also think Luque has a lot to gain as well. So it's I don't know, it's an interesting predicament.
Yeah, this is a weird one. A Luque loss, that's a puzzling one. What you do with Luque, I really do like the Holland fight. I wouldn't hate seeing him versus Michael Venom Page, because Page has already said he's not fighting Wonder Boy. He's already come out and said he's going to decline that fight. I would really like to see. I like the Gilbert makes sense, but I would really like to see Gilbert versus Colby. I think that right there, because I think that would be you eliminate one of the wrestlers coming off of a loss. As much heat as the Ian Gary and the Colby fight has been getting, the odds of us actually getting what we want in that instance, what's more likely, I think, is Ian Gary versus Michael Venom Page. That's something that's been talked about. Both of them, I think, would be inclined to take it. It just, I don't know. Something feels, as much as I think, there's the beef there between Colby and Ian. But I don't know. I have a gut feeling that fight never happens. It's one of those gut feelings where I feel like everything is in place for a fight like that to take place, and it's something we don't get. There's that one fight every year. Or every few months even, where guys are beefing, guys are ready to go at each other, and the UFC is not inclined to do it. The UFC, I think, has incentive not to get Ian Gary involved in a mess. and a mess is the only thing that Colby brings. They've got to try and clean up the character of Gary, especially if they want him to be a champion, especially if they want to bring the UFC back to Ireland. Colby's image has been marred as it is over the past few months. If you can get him into a cordial matchup against a Michael Venom Page, where you have two guys who can be nice, they can be cordial to each other, they can kind of uphold decent images with one another. You've even already seen kind of the effects that Colby's had on Ian the past few weeks. As people, I mean, as much as people hate Colby, people are starting to hate Ian too, and they're going to run into a real problem if Ian becomes a villain, especially when he's not trying to be a villain. I agree with you, Noah. If Joaquin wins or loses, there's a ton of wiggle room. I think and honestly, the winner of the fight getting Sean Brady makes a ton of sense. Sean Brady's the one guy who doesn't have the opponent right now. I'd love to see Buckley versus Sean Brady. I'd love to see Luque versus Sean Brady. But yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. As much as I'd love to see, there's so many dynamics to what they do at welterweight next, especially depending on if they shaft Bilal or not. If Shavkat Rakhmonov ends up getting the title fight because of his name, Bilal needs a fight. I don't know, but yeah, it's an interesting situation at welterweight. This fight's interesting, and it's definitely a safe play for these guys to go out there and just get a decisive win.
Yeah, I was thinking kind of the same with Sean Brady though, because he was initially planned for this fight. I still don't know if I like it as much if Luque wins. I personally, I'm with Tobey. I like the Gilbert Burns idea. I don't hate the idea of you saying Burns versus Covington. And honestly, that might be better than Covington versus Gary, to be honest. But either way, I personally, from a Luque perspective, I would love to see Burns. But Sean Brady would make a lot of sense since it was the initial fight plan anyways. And if you're Buckley, I think that fight makes perfect sense because who else? As you said, a lot of the higher up people in the division have a fight already. He's not going to jump into the top 5 more than likely anyways. Why not just give him Sean Brady, who's like 7 or 8 right now? So I completely agree. I think Sean Brady should probably be next up for either one of these fighters. It makes too much sense.
Well, and on top of the fact that Luque hasn't fought a welterweight in a year and a half. I mean, let's be real. After the Neal fight, when Neal gave him a brain bleed, with the amount, I'm dead serious. He's as horrendous as it is that you guys are laughing at that. He had a brain bleed and thought he would never fight again. And then he comes back, and I don't think it's any coincidence that he fights a true 55er in RDA in his return fight. And so for the first time in a year and a half, we're going to see him against a guy who's actually meant for the weight class. And that's going to be interesting. What does he look like finally fighting a welterweight again? I don't know. I agree. The Brady fight makes the most sense to me, and you could give him Burns because of the loss, but it's tomorrow night's going to be telling to see how he deals with the physicality of a true welterweight. He was able to kind of play it safe in the RDA fight because there's only so much a true 55er can offer you at 70. This is an 85er coming down to 70, and this guy's got real power. We'll see how he does.
I know we don't want to make this a ramble about welterweight, but like, if Wonderboy and Paige already said he's not gonna fight, like it's just like this division's in like such a weird spot because like I think Dana like wants to like pick Paige's fights like carefully because I mean if Holland wanted to, he could have finished Paige on the ground in that last fight. He could have. He almost did. Holland
would require him taking him to the ground.
Holland had Paige on the ground.
Yeah, for about 30 seconds of a 15-minute fight.
What I'm saying is though, like Holland goes. All I'm saying is Holland goes for a show. You could tell that like he won. I don't know. It's just like. And Gary, I actually disagree with both of you. I think this is perfect for Gary to fight Covington. It might be bad guy, but like I think Dana's probably thinking like, what do we do with Covington after that? And Gary, I think he's basically gonna let Gary pick whoever he wants. And the top of that division, like, is so close. I think Covington's a perfect top 5 fight for him. So, because I mean, what do you do with? I mean, Covington versus Burns, that'd be a great fight. But like, I don't know. I never want to see Colby Covington near a main event ever again. I've never been so excited and been that let down. That was one of the worst title performances I've ever seen. Like, that was horrible. But
Yeah, the card as a whole was kind of boring. I'm kind of with you though. The Colby Covington main event in December kind of turned me off from Colby Covington completely. I was honestly probably even rooting for him in that fight. I didn't have a strong conviction towards either Edwards or Covington, but just as a whole, that fight was just very. It was just a weird fight, and Covington just did not perform the way we thought he would, especially after how he'd performed against Usman plenty of times. Like, we thought he'd come out and perform a lot better. He didn't seem like he had a chance in that fight. So I definitely think he needs to fight down in the rankings. I don't think you can make any argument of him fighting Bilal or Shavkat or whatever. I think Shavkat versus JDM needs to be set in stone. That needs to be the next number one contender after the Bilal versus Edwards championship. And that fight's going to be such a boring fight, to be honest with you. I'm not looking forward to watching Bilal fight. But, I mean, you're exactly right, Jeremiah. Bilal deserves a shot. And if they give it to anybody else, I mean, it's probably just not going to be right for the division. So that's personally what I'd like to see. And Edwards has to fight down either way, whether he's fighting for Burns to see who goes down or if he's fighting against Ian Gary. I mean, one of them. He's got to fight down at some point. He doesn't deserve a top shot or a top fight, again, anytime soon. So.
Just one quick last thing. I think this was an opportunity missed by Dana. UFC 300 is stacked, but like I feel like Edwards versus Bilal was the perfect third fight on this main card. You get it out of the way. It has to happen. And I think you could have still put it on it with the way the card is now. But like, what do you do with it? Like, I wouldn't have even minded if you put it on Brazil and made that a 2-fight like pay-per-view. But like, you don't want that headlining a pay-per-view. That's just like, no one wants to see Bilal fight.
Well, they did. Dana announced this week that there's going to be a pay-per-view in England in the summer. So you run the risk of Leon getting injured, and then one of your two champs can't fight. And it'll be interesting to see what they do. Do they put the interim champ as the main event over the undisputed champ when they go to England? Because Aspinall is going to defend the interim belt as if he's the champ. And he probably gets the Blades fight, which was the main event 2 years ago in the Fight Night in London when Aspinall tore his ACL. So it'll be interesting to see the bout order for that. The pay-per-view in England is going to be great because we finally have 4 or 5 guys from England who are like top 5 in their divisions, which makes it really exciting. But I think that fight probably headlines an English pay-per-view come July, and they have Shavkat in attendance. They have JD. They have as many guys as they can have in attendance to beef that up. And although I really wouldn't be mad if they made Aspinall the headliner for that and just said, this guy's calling a shot and he's going to run through the division. And I think that gets you more pay-per-view buys if you have Leon versus Bilal as the co-main and just tell Leon, like, hey, you're the co-main. We'll still give you your pay-per-view points. We'll still give you your cut of this, but Aspinall's going to sell us the pay-per-views. But yeah, I think that, because usually every July they go to Salt Lake. And this year Dana has said they're going to be switching things up. Even I've heard that, you saw that they booked Giga Chikadze and Arnold Allen for July. And I've heard kind of through multiple sources that they have no idea where they're fighting, whether it's in the U.S. or now it could potentially be overseas, I think. So I think that gives kind of a hint. We might be seeing an end of July. That'll be 303. Or will that be 304? Yeah, that'll be 304 because International Fight Week's 303 because there's 2 pay-per-views in June. So that'll be 304. And we know in August, 305 is in Perth. So that would make sense if they made a little international run before the Sphere in September. Abu Dhabi's every October. New York's in November, Vegas in December. But we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah, and looking back on it, hindsight's definitely 2020. He was obviously not putting Leon on that, or Leon. Well, he said he offered Leon 3 fights though, so I guess he wasn't trying to avoid Leon for this England card. But I'm kind of with Tobey. I mean, the BMF fight's awesome, but especially now that we know that both of the 2 guys in the BMF fights probably would have had a title shot, and now they're just fighting each other because it's the BMF title fight. I think it means less now because they could have such a bigger fight in their future that they're potentially jeopardizing. So I'm kind of with Tobey. The way that I personally would have liked to see 300 was the Pereira Hill was perfect. That's exactly the fight I was hoping for to headline it. Then I would have loved to see Leon versus Bilal be the co-main, get it out of the way, make it not a headliner, get it in a 3-fight or a 3 championship fight card, so it's not as big of a deal. And then I would have liked to see Weili versus Grasso, but I think this strawweight championship they lined up was really good. I think Xiaonen's really solid, and I think that's going to be a heck of a fight. But yeah, I mean, the Leon versus Bilal fight, it's got to happen at some point. I agree. If they put in Aspinall as the headliner, sure, go for it. It's not going to bother me one bit. But that was a big rabbit trail right there. But so y'all want to go ahead and move on to talking over the main card or talking about fights we like or anything?
Yeah, why don't we start discussing the main card? I believe the opening fight on the main card is Chidi and Njokuani versus Reese McKee. Tobey, what do you think about that fight?
So the first thing I noticed about this fight, both guys are coming in on 3-fight losing streaks. So it's going to be interesting. I literally just think it's going to be a stand and bang fight. And I'm not even going to try to pronounce that guy's name, right? But I was looking on their past fights, and he does have KO power, and nothing about McKee. No, I think he's going to get knocked out. I'm not going to lie. He doesn't have a win in the UFC. That's my opinion on it.
I hate to keep correcting you, but McKee has won 3 out of his last 4. Because he, not in the UFC, but he got cut from the UFC after his 2 losses ago and went and won 3 straight Cage Warriors fights by knockout, and then came back to the UFC and fought Angelusa. That was an interesting fight. Lusa put it on him for about 2.5 rounds, and then all of a sudden it was like one of Lusa's shots that woke McKee up, and he just started putting a beating on Lusa. But yeah, so I was impressed by the fact that, he got cut from the UFC and had the wherewithal to go to Cage Warriors and starch 3 people and prove that he deserved to be back in the big show. I won't lie. Both of these guys are unreliable. They're both unreliable guys historically in the UFC. The one thing that really worries me when it comes to Chidi is that this fight is at 170. Chidi was ripped at 185. I'm worried about, say this fight goes 5 minutes and we start round 2. What does Chidi have left? I mean, if you think about the Albert Duraev fight, I mean, after about a round and a half, Chidi had nothing left power-wise. If the fight goes past 5 minutes, I agree, he's live for a knockout while he's able to still bounce around on his toes. But when he becomes flat-footed, and McKee, the one thing you can say about McKee is the guy can take a shot. If he can take 5 minutes worth of shots, and then you're standing toe-to-toe in the second round, and then all of a sudden you start to miss him, and then McKee starts to jab on you. It's gonna be interesting. That first round's it's gonna come down to whether this fight gets out of the first round. If it comes out of the first round, Chidi's in trouble, because especially at 170, if this fight was at 185 or a catch weight, I think we're talking about a completely different fight. But Chidi at 170, the last time Chidi fought at 170, he said he was never gonna fight at 170 again. So what that tells me is that the UFC is saying, listen, you're getting starched at 185. You need to either go to 170 or we might cut you. That could end up being his downfall. McKee is a sneaky good fighter. He hasn't proven it, but his Cage Warriors experience and his durability that he proved in the Lusa fight, I mean, it'll be interesting.
Yeah, so I have Chidi by knockout first round. I saw what Tobey was saying, this because I was thinking battle of the UFC losing streaks, because Reese is 0-3 in the UFC right now. He just lost his last fight since he got back in. I think that was in the Gone card back in September. So yeah, I mean, he desperately needs a win. But you're right, he did prove that he deserved to be here after he starched a few guys in Cage Warriors, but. Yeah, I've got first round knockout by Chidi. He finally took his much needed break because his chin was just giving out, and he kept fighting right after he got knocked out. I mean, literally a couple months apart from each other, 3 fights in a row. So he's finally taken his time, and I think that he's going to come back. He's going to have more of a chin on him, and I don't see this fight ending any other way than a knockout. It's going to be really sloppy, and I just think Chidi's going to be able to knock him out. So moving on to the to the next fight of the main card, we have Bill Aggio. I don't know how to say that name. Do you know how to say it? Is it Aggio? Algeo, okay. The one thing I will say about this card that I've noticed is this is the fight card of hard names to say. This whole card is just crazy names. But Bill Algeo versus Kyle Nelson. I have Bill Algeo going by decision on that fight. I think it's going to be a very grinded out sort of fight, and I think Bill Algeo is just going to get the edge in that one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, these guys are both kind of decision merchants, but Algeo's like, I think he's more well-rounded, and if you just look at like losses in Nelson's career, I wouldn't be shocked if Algeo submitted him, but I mean, I don't think any of us would be shocked if this goes to decision.
I'm with you guys on this one. Algeo by decision. I think the karate stance is going to be too much. I think he's going to be able to piece him up. The one thing that worries me is that Kyle Nelson has gotten good at pressuring people. I think, Fernando Padilla had a very impressive win last week, and guess who beat Fernando Padilla Mexican Independence Day last year? Kyle Nelson. He pressured him. He jabbed him up. So Bill Algeo's just got to be on his P's and Q's. And I believe I forgot to give my prediction for the last fight as well. So I'll go ahead and throw that in. I have McKee, 3rd round KO. I think he's going to weather the storm. Chidi will gas out. I've picked Chidi so many times and he's failed me so many times. I just don't have... if it was at 185, Chidi 1st round knockout all day. I think less fluid on the brain. It's going to play a big role. I don't think he's going to have cardio cutting down that much. But moving forward, I think the next fight is Nursultan Ruzaboyev versus Cedric Dumas. And I'll just go ahead and give my short. I still haven't seen a fight where Cedric has proved he deserves to be in the UFC. To be completely honest, I'll keep it short and sweet. His fight versus Abu Azaitar in October was just absolutely disappointing to watch. The fact that he couldn't get him out of there, and the fact that he had a way to success and he completely ignored everything about the first round that brought him success. I think fight IQ is low. Potential is there, physically and ability-wise, but I think Nursultan is just too much experience, too much explosiveness. I'm not sure Cedric can get passed around with him, but I've got Nursultan in this one.
Yeah, I've also got Nursultan in this one. I think this fight could be really interesting if Dumas can get the fight. If he can play it smart. The problem is I think he's really going to let himself go and he's going to get submitted. I personally chose 2nd round submission. I don't think he's a smart enough fighter, and I also agree. I don't know if he should even be in the UFC. He's been disappointing every time I feel like I've watched him fight. So could he win? Absolutely. Does he have the skill set to win? I think he does. I don't think he's smart enough, and honestly, I don't think that he knows how to use his talents that he has to win this fight. So I've got Nursultan by submission in this fight.
Yeah, I've got Nursultan too, and the biggest takeaway I took from this fight is like all the back and forth on even if I think Dumas can do this, and you look at one of his wins, Cody Brundage, and apparently that's the prove it fight for Bo Nickel on UFC 300. I thought that was just like funny to look at it like that, but yeah, I mean, I just think it just comes down to Dumas's level of competition in the UFC has been horrible. I mean, so I think Nursultan also has a lot more pressure to win this fight, just if you look at his age and like he doesn't have a ton of fights left. So I think he gets it done.
So moving on to our last 3 fights, I think we can kind of go over the main and the co-main a little bit quicker because we've already kind of broken down those fights. Moving on to the 3rd to last fight, we have Bruno Silva versus Chris Weidman. I know, Tobey, you love some Chris Weidman, especially after that terrible leg injury he had. I don't think Weidman's got that step anymore. I actually think Silva's kind of going to starch him. I've got a 1st round knockout. Could Weidman survive? Absolutely. I don't think Weidman's sharp enough on his feet, and I think he's definitely well past his prime, I would say. So I think Silva's up and coming. I think Silva could put on a really good performance. So,
I mean, if you look at the last fight Weidman was in, the fact that Tavares didn't knock him out Weidman couldn't even stand. This is going to be a 1st or 2nd round knockout. So I don't think Weidman lasts, and I think I never want to see a guy get knocked out, but like this needs to be it for Weidman. He should have stopped a couple fights ago after that injury.
Yeah, there's something we do when it's fighters we love, fighters that have a storied past. We kind of factor in the way they once looked into all our predictions for them. I feel like we constantly do that with Tony Ferguson too. we factor in the boogeyman. We factor in the guy that knocked out Anderson Silva twice in 1 year. That's just not who he is anymore, unfortunately. And as much as we miss him, we have to be honest in our predictions. And I just don't know. Weidman's claiming he has mobility again because of some new, magic herbal supplement that he's being able to take, he said in the interviews yesterday. But I see no evidence of him being able to get out of the way. And as vulnerable as Silva can leave himself to be, I think his power is going to be too much, unfortunately. And I'm with you guys. I think Silva wins this one. We have broken down the main and the co-main pretty extensively, so why don't we kind of head into our picks. I'll start off with the co-main. I'm worried with the fact that Luque has not fought a welterweight in quite a while. His movement to me this past August looked really awkward. It looked like he was having trouble moving around the cage, and maybe that's ring rust. Maybe that's, the thought that went through his head that maybe he wouldn't be fighting in the UFC ever again. Either way, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure how far he can get again. He got really high into the division, then has had a fall over the past year and a half, 2 years. I think he's going to have trouble with the movement of Buckley. I think if Buckley touches him with a powerful shot, Luque is going to have trouble with that. I mean, Luque had real trouble with Jeff Neal, got finished by Jeff Neal. I think the movement will be too much, and I think I have Buckley winning this one.
So I like Buckley on the feet as well, but after watching a couple of Buckley's past fights, I think he sometimes will overextend, especially when he thinks he's gotten them. And I think he's gonna get some combination. Luque's gonna put up a guard. Buckley's gonna do everything, but I think Luque knocks him out with a counter hook in the second. That's what I believe. But I also think if it gets to grappling or the ground, Luque is a much more well-versed fighter. So it'll be interesting, but I do think Luque gets it done.
Yeah, I've also got Luque in this fight. I will preface this for everybody watching. I am definitely a Luque fan. He's one of my favorite fighters in the UFC for sure. It's just a ton of fun to watch. So I do have Luque winning this fight. I am a little bit worried about him fighting welterweight again, but I think Luque's got so much power. He's such a smart fighter in my opinion, and I think he's going to be able to get it done. Moving on to the main event, keep it short and simple because I've already kind of talked about, we've talked about this so much. But I've got Erin Blanchfield. I think she's going to beat Manon Fiorot by decision. I think that's going to be an unbelievable fight. But I have Erin Blanchfield by decision in that fight. The future of that division, Erin Blanchfield, I should say.
This might be kind of a hot take. I actually think Blanchfield is going to get Fiorot down a lot easier than people think. And I actually think Blanchfield's going to sub her in the third. Fiorot striking is obviously it's insane, but I think Blanchfield, she's going to shoot a lot of them, and I think she's going to get Fiorot down a lot easier than people think. So I think sub round 3.
This is a tough fight. It's the odds are throwing me off. There's a rat line going on. Blanchfield has been close to a minus 200 favorite all week, which, all respect to Blanchfield for the run that she's gone on, but you're the number 2 ranked contender fighting the number 3 ranked contender. There's no way you should be a minus 200 favorite when Manon arguably has fought the tougher competition, coming off a win off of Rose. People forget Manon has beat Mayra Bueno Silva, a person who only wins on the ground. And Manon was able to escape those positions where she was, in danger. When Blanchfield is forced to stay on the feet, I am terrified she's going to get put out constantly. The Talia Santos fight scared me to death. Every time that Talia was able to push Blanchfield off and land a strike, I felt like the fight was close to being in a real dangerous spot for Blanchfield. I think Manon is very underrated. I think people are in love with Blanchfield to the extent where they're not looking at any of her flaws or any of the things that Manon can exploit. I think Manon's movement is underrated. I think she'll be able to avoid the takedowns enough to where she lands more damage. And I think Manon wins a decision, 48-47 or 49-46. I think that's where we end up, and I think people end up shocked afterwards. All right, well, we have made it to the final segment of the show, and we're going to close out each episode with a parlay challenge. And so a brief explanation of what the parlay challenge is that we will each pick, it has to be a minimum 2 picks of winning fighters only. This challenge does not involve any props. You'll pick as many winning fighters, minimum of 2, that you think will win. If your whole leg hits, that's the only way that you can earn points. If the whole leg hits, you'll get a point per winning leg. If your whole winning parlay is filled with underdogs, you get an extra point on top of that. And we will tally the points each week, and at the end of the year, whoever has the most points is the winner, and the person who comes in dead last buys the first pay-per-view of next year on them. So Tobey, why don't you, well, before we start that, let's just give out, if you guys have any prop locks for the week, since the parlay challenge is only for winning fighters, what props do you guys really like this week?
Yes, I can go ahead and start off with the props. So I actually chose 5 locks, so I honestly misunderstood this, so I'm going to have to figure it out at the last second, but I do have some prop locks. So the first one was Pacheco versus Loughran, the first fight of the entire night. The books say it's going to be a knockout or it's going to end early. My prop lock is for the fight to go the distance at plus 150. I think that I just don't know if there's going to be a knockout because I think it's Pacheco going from featherweight to bantamweight. I think he's going to have more of a chin on him than we expect. Or if you're a little bit scared about doing that, the fight to go over 1.5 rounds at minus 160 is not a bad bet either. Also did Ibo Aslan by knockout. To win by knockout, it's plus 105. I don't really see that fight going any other way. I think he's going to win by knockout pretty easily. I had a Chidi money line. I know that we were arguing about that earlier in the fight, so take that as you will. But I do have Chidi money line as a lock. And then I did Blanchfield versus Fior to go the distance. I think, as you said earlier, Jay, I think Fior is really going to be able to stay out of trouble with those submissions, but I think Blanchfield's going to do enough to win the fight. So, but either way, I think it's enough to make the fight go the distance. So that's my prop locks for this card. So.
I only have one, but I have Bill Algeo and Kyle Nelson to go the distance. Again, we talked about it earlier. Both decision merchants, and I don't really see either one of them getting a finish.
The props were kind of tough this week because of how even the fights were. I really liked Kalen Loughran versus Pacheco. I believe when I checked before we started the pod, to go over 2.5 was plus 114. So if you think Loughran or Pacheco could steal a late finish, but the fight still goes into like the depths of the third round, I think that's sneaky. Even if you think fight most likely goes to decision, but something wonky could happen, that's some nice money to just get over 2.5. I also like Nursultan Rozaboyev versus Cedric Dumas to go under 1.5. I think that should be plus money. Those were kind of the 2 props that stuck out to me. I really like the Ebo or Anton. If you want to hedge and do Ebo and Anton on 2 separate plays by KO, I don't see that fight ending any other way than a finish. So I know the first time they fought, Anton subbed him. So if you want to play Anton by finish, Ebo by knockout, hedge, and you win either way, I mean, that could be really good too. But let's get into the parlay challenge. Tobey, why don't you start us off and give us your parlay?
All right, so I'm just going to preface this by saying I think Luque is a lock, but I think that fight's too close. So I didn't put that one on here, but I have a 4-pick parlay plus 348, right? First pick, I got Bill Algeo money line. I think he gets it done. This is definitely a lock of the night. I got Bruno Silva money line. I can't think of one way Weidman's gonna beat him. I've got Lupita Godinez money line, and then Erin Blanchfield money line. That's my 4-pick. I think they get it done, and I think I'm gonna put some money on it too. I'm feeling confident about it.
All right. For mine, I'm going to take Kalen Loughran. I think he goes ahead and gets that victory to begin the night. I think he's just going to have too much pressure against Pacheco. As crazy as Pacheco was in that first fight on the Contender Series versus Silva, I think Loughran will be too much for him there. I'm going to put in Lupita Godinez. I think she is someone the rest of the strawweights need to be on the lookout for. I'm going to go ahead and put Joaquin Buckley, and I'm going to add Manon Fiorot. So I'm going to make that my 4. I'll go Loughran, Lupita, Buckley, and Manon. So man, one of us will potentially be in the lead.
So I've got a 5-legger here that I decided to do for this challenge. The first one is Colin Loughran. I'd have him winning, so that's my first leg that I'm going with. I think it's gonna be a great fight. I think it's personally gonna go decision, but I don't think he's gonna be able to finish him. I have Ibo Aslan was my second leg. I think he wins by knockout after he got knocked out in 2020 by this fighter. I don't know how to pronounce his name. Turkal. Yeah, Turkals. But I think he's going to get his revenge. So I've got Ibo Aslan as my second leg. It's my third leg. I have Julio Arce. I think he's going to be able to get it done against Burns. Man, I really want to put Chidi. I'm not going to, but I do really want to. I want to make that known. I'm going to go with Bill Algeo, and to round it out, I'm going to put Bruno Silva. I really want to put Erin Blanchfield as well, but I'm going to stay away from it. But a little bit lame, I guess, staying away from the main and the co-main. But I think those 2 fights are just going to be pretty close to predict. So those are my 5 legs for this challenge.
Before we finish, I'm gonna make mine 5 too, because I'm gonna put Ruzaboyev in mine. I like him to. And I also can't go 4 on the first week if Noah's going to go 5. So I'm just going to add in Ruzaboyev.
I'm not going to be the single man now. Put Luque in my 5 pick. He's getting a knockout.
That's beautiful, Tobey. I love it. So those are our prop bets. If you guys want to trust us, I wouldn't, but there you go. We'll keep a running tally of our point system. Maybe if it didn't make sense to you guys this week, maybe it will make more sense after we kind of get the points on the board next week. But hey, this has been the first week of the MMA Group Chat Podcast. This has been a fun episode, guys. We're planning on being back every single week, Saturday mornings, previewing the cards, going over MMA news, UFC news. So be sure to join us back if you guys want to be a part of this group chat. Be sure to hit the subscribe button if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a like, share it with your friends. Or if you're listening on Spotify, we will get the episode up on Apple Music. Anybody that knows, though, it is a pain to get it up on Apple Music. So for now, it's just on Spotify, but it will be on Apple Music. But be sure to follow the podcast, turn on the bell notifications so you get notified every week. And we'll link the socials down in the description if you're interested in the Instagram or the Twitter or any of that stuff. But yeah, I mean, unless you guys have anything else to add, thank you guys for joining, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.